All right, we're going to go in to look at some principles. We're going to talk about some principles of management. It's already on. Talk about some principles of management. And there are 5 principles of management. Plan, organize, coordinate, control, and direct. Plan, organize, plan, organize, coordinate, control, and direct, yes.
Okay. Are we coming to the finance and budget?
We coming into it. We sliding it. I got a method to my madness. Wait till after you got your questions. Wait till after when I got your questions. Plan, organize, coordinate, control, and direct. You got to do anything, and like I said, this can apply to any ministry. But trustees, you have to understand, you plan, organize, coordinate, control, direct. See, the other thing, one of the things I got, this is called the Equipping Church. I think I got a CD that goes with this too. But it talks about equipping the church and ministry and all that kind of stuff. Because see, as trustees, you need to know, and particularly being administrative, you need to know what everybody else does. Because how can you support somebody properly if you don't know what they do? So you need to, and that's why vision is important, because you need to understand you are the support for everybody else. You are the support. So you got to have at least an idea. You don't have to know every detail, but you got to have a concept or an idea of what everybody else does so that you could properly support them. Let me go back to a relationship again. How you going to know how to properly help your wife if you don't know what she does? You giving her a lawnmower for her birthday, and she may need a crock pot. You know? Because your mama cut grass don't mean your wife cut grass. Hello, somebody. So you have to know and have an idea of what they do. So you got to begin to support that in how you manage, how you plan out what you plan out to help effectively manage what they do. How you begin to help the money and everything else, the money, the property, and make sure you continually are planned up on that so that they can do what they need to do. You're the help. You're the help for the soldiers on the ground. The soldiers on the ground are the people who do ministry. You are the help. Resources, supplies. You are the help. You know, trustees ought to be finding out. See, this is the problem that you have when you have trustees that think that they're owners, because you ain't looking. You hardly ever see trustees say, Pastor, what is it you need to help do what you got to do? Ministries, what does y'all need to do what y'all got to do to see how we can go back and plan this out to figure out how we can help y'all so that y'all got everything you need, or at least we can get the best of everything from what money we have to help y'all get it done. When have you heard trustees that say when y'all need help? Most of them you be like, no, we can't do that. No, we don't need to spend that kind of money. Why we need to spend money for this? I don't see that. Yeah, you don't see it because God ain't showing you. But that's why vision is important. And so when you plan, organize, coordinate, control, and direct, you ought to be able to have that beginning to organize your trustee ministry. Planning on trustees, where trustees begin to find out, sit down and have, you know, and particularly if you do it in a smaller church, you could do it sort of in bigger ministries too, but sit down with ministries and find out what they do and how you can help them do what they do better. What can we do to help ease the load? When you have trustees find out, do that. When have you heard trustees doing that? That's what they ought to be doing. Because their job is to add to the service. And then the tools for management: time, money, manpower, space, and material. Because you think about this. Everything you do is going to encompass time. And ministry costs money. Y'all repeat after me. Ministry costs money. See, that's what you need to tell people. See, as trustees, y'all, when they start barking about money, first thing you got to say is ministry costs money. Y'all, all the trustees should be saying it with a resounding line. Ministry costs money. Because guess what? If y'all say it versus what I say it, because y'all part of y'all. And see, y'all going to listen to y'all. Y'all ain't going to necessarily listen to me. Because that's y'all cousin. I'm from outside, from Louisville, Kentucky, coming down here, and then I'm trying to get y'all to see him in the church. But see, that'll keep the heat off me as the pastor. As the pastor. Amen. So then first thing they be crying about, y'all talk about is money. The trustee said, well, ministry costs money. Amen. That'll hush a lot of that stuff up. Time, money, manpower, people power takes people to do whatever. Space, you're going to need space. So now you got to adequately make sure that the spaces, trustees, that you're adequately making sure that the space is adequate and accommodated, and they got everything they need in the space to do what they need to do in the space. This is how you ought to be thinking. How can I make this space better so that now those ministries that occupy the space can do what they do with excellence? This is how trustee mindset should be. I'm thinking about how excellent I can make this so the ministries can do what they do better. So if I make the space better so that they can function in the space, that's, oh man. Trustee mindset. And of course it takes material, supplies, books, whatever. Church budget. If you church budget, we talk about 4 areas. Get to that. Let me see if I can get that. Is that raining? Oh. That remind me, I tell a side joke, but that remind me when my grandfather died, I was 5 years old, my mama's daddy, in 1973. And we were at the doing the wake, right? And I told my grandma, I said, "Is Papa dead?" She said, "Yes, he's really dead." We sitting all up in the wake. I said, "Is he really dead?" She said, "Yes, baby, he's dead." I said, "Well, who is that out here breathing?" The air conditioner cut on. That was the air conditioner. I thought Papa would breathe, but he in the casket. None of them fell out laughing. They were rolling, boy. Oh, shoot. Yeah, I thought that would lighten the load for us a little bit. That's if you, now I'm gonna give you 4 areas, and this is the budget in terms of what we spend towards, because you got income, and in the budget I'm gonna put it at the top here. You got income, how you take your money in, and then you got expenses. And so how you plan, we're gonna talk about the expense portion. We're gonna deal with the expense portion. Remind me to say something about income too. Because I want to talk about that Jesus turned up the tables. I want to finish that story about that scripture. So I want to talk about income for a minute. But I want to get all this out the way. Just y'all remind me now. Y'all gonna remind me? Okay. So if you categorize, one of the things in budgets, we have line items. Everybody know what line items are, right? Because in that book, like the other book I gave y'all, make sure I get my books back, because they seem like I don't see where they are. You know, they can slide on, walk. They got legs and walk out the door. But in this one right here, in Crumroy's book, they talk about how to do line items, line item budgeting, and all of that. But everybody in the church sees all of this, all these line items and all this stuff, big old sheets, 4 or 5 sheets of stuff with a bunch of line items and numbers on them and all that kind of, that stuff get kind of confusing to people. But your budget should have 4 categories in which those line items should be under, okay? And it makes it easier if you give the line items, and you can easily see, now you can line it up to vision, okay? First category is evangelism and missions, okay? Which is roughly about 10%. You know, you got your justice, your local justice, which like what we have in Daytona, we got a justice ministry that's part of a national network but we give to the justice ministry. We give to that every year. We give so much amount of money for the justice ministry because we do justice ministry. Like we're working on affordable housing, which I'm on the executive committee of Faith Justice Ministry, Volusia County. We're working on affordable housing. We're doing on civil citations. Civil citations, when they, instead of giving kids, charging them and stuff, they give them for something that they being just dumb kids, they give them a civil citation so they don't get a record. So they've been working on that. They've been making that successful, and the justice ministries that are throughout the state have been working on that together. And then we're working on affordable housing. Now we're still trying to get in some counties they do have an affordable housing trust fund. We're trying to get that in Volusia County right now, so they can help for affordable housing because it has a housing crisis. Not only is it a housing crisis, but you got people that make only so much money, and more than 30% of their income goes to housing. More than 30%. So we're trying to work on that issue, and then you got temporary housing. So we're trying to move people from as they say, to unwither the man's hand. That's what the justice ministry is hitting the areas and the politicians and everything else about that. So anyway, evangelism mission should be about 10%. That was a church who was really bragging about they give 30% to missions. But when we look at that, and as I'm getting to 4 categories, I'm going to put that 30% on because I'm going to get back to it. The next line item should be, what was that, personnel? Personnel. That's roughly 50%, usually on average 40 to 60. Because if you have on smaller churches, the pastor and whoever, sometimes it's only the pastor. Sometimes the pastor takes up the sizable portion of that budget. Or in larger churches, the percentage becomes less because you got more money. When you got $1 million budget and the pastor gets $150,000, and then you've got the musician gets $50,000, and you may have another $30,000. You may pay a custodian or a steward, what they call them, custodians. You may pay them another $30,000. So you may have 25% in a larger church of $1 million. You got $250,000 going to payroll. So that may be 25% of your budget because you're in a larger church. But when you got a budget of $160,000, $150,000, $100,000, the pastor's is going to get the lion's share of that. It's just this bigger portion of the budget, you smaller church. It's just the statistics. But the larger the church, the smaller this personnel budget's going to be, percentage-wise, because you got more money. So then we have ministries and facilities. So I left my clicker at home, so I'll be clicking where I can sit there and do this. But somebody said they were going to switch for me, but they yeah, he got caught up in the rapture, huh? Ministries. That's 20%. And then we have facilities. Or property. Facility / property, you can put / property, 20%. Okay, now, if the church that was bragging about they had 30% give to missions, and pastor was a missions person, and the church was bragging that they got 30%, and when he's looking at that, since you got 10, 50, 60, 20, 80, that's 100%. So that totals up 100, right? So if you're giving 30%, it's going to take something from one of these 2 portions, one of these 3 portions, right? But you found out that the church had a morale problem. And when you look at the percentages of the budget, you found out from the personnel side, they had a morale problem. And what was happening is that 20% was coming from here. So they were 30% personnel. It was hard to figure out when you see the numbers that they have a morale problem. Because people wasn't getting paid what they should. It creates a problem. This is why in the church we got to understand, why is it, I'm going to say it this way, why is it when you don't get paid what you think you deserve, you get mad, but then when it comes to not paying the pastor what he deserves, And you got the money now. If you ain't had the money, I understand. And you got the money. And you ain't going to pay the pastor what he deserves, and then he getting upset, and you want to look at him like, he ain't supposed to be involved with no money. And that ain't being the Lord. That ain't no Lord, man of God. And doing. What about you get mad? You get upset when you ain't getting paid what you worth and they got the money. So what's good for the goose is good for the gander. And the Bible says, muzzle not the ox that tread the corn. And you know, in the scripture in Timothy where it says the man is worthy of double honor, in the King James, well, that language double honor means double pay. Hello, somebody talk to me in here. So why is it we uneasy about somebody else getting paid what they worth versus what we getting paid what we worth? If you got the money, that is. See, we don't like ourselves too well. We want to be selfish. We don't want to bless somebody because we'll get the blessing in return. And so they had a personnel problem, 30%. Now here's the solution to do is that instead of taking it out of here, they put this back to 50%, take this 20% over here, take this 20% over here and make this a capital campaign fundraising for missions. So you ain't bothering this is what you're doing there. You're raising the 20% in capital campaign. Makes a lot more sense.
Okay, explain capital campaign.
It's just raising money for whatever venture you want to raise it for.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yes, outside of the regular tithes and offering. I mean, you ain't, because see what we like to do with black folk, we want to take, since we raise the capital campaign, we're going to cut our tithes down to 6% and then give 4% over the hit. No. That ain't capital campaign. You just robbing Peter to pay Paul. No, that ain't, and you still going to run them the same problem. Because it's got to come from somewhere. You know, so now what happens is that you encourage people to give offering, because you cannot give offering until you first give a what? A tithe. Somebody reads the Bible. Y'all been reading the Bible now. Come on now. It's tithe, and anything excessive tithes is offering. So now you encourage people to give out of their offerings, because that's all it is, additional capital campaign raised for giving to missions. And so you don't take it from here. And so, like I said property, facilities, stuff like that, because van and all that stuff will become, transportation be covered under that. Your ministries, and you got supplies for ministries, and you got personnel, and you got evangelism missions. And property and facilities, you got machines and all that kind of stuff, computers and all that stuff will be up under here. You get to do that. So when you categorize this budget into 4 areas, it makes it a lot more simpler. So when you do your totals, or really do percentages, so when you do your actual percentages, if y'all have budgets in place already, categorize them in these 4 areas and put all your line items under each specified area. So you can really see what you're doing. Not only should you get your totals of how much you've been spending in each area, but also do your percentages of the total budget, so that now you can see where you are. Because if you do your percentage of your total budget, you can see where you're falling short. And then you can see why you have some of the problems you have. You can tell, and then you can also tell, remember I said you do what you believe? All I got to do is look at your checkbook and tell me what you really believe. Because where your treasury is, how many folk been reading the Bible? Jesus said, there your treasure is, where also your heart is. So I can look at your checkbook and tell where your heart is. I can look at a church's budget and tell what their heart is. If this is like less than 10%, like 4%, they'll tell me you ain't really caring about ministry too much. And then when you look down here, 20%, your ministries, what efforts are going to support that ministry? If that's below, and you got a high personnel, low ministry, and low evangelism, and then you got high facility, that's a big indication to me that you got a bureaucratic church. Big indication, because guess what? All you're doing is putting most of your money here, and then most of the time you're gonna be arguing about this stuff over here. And you preparing, and you got good budgets. You could do a good budget. You got good budget. You got good insurance in place, and you always updating all this stuff. But you ain't doing nothing here and here. You just an organization that just so happens to be a church.
So that takes you back to going back to look at your vision again.
Yeah, thank you. And that's why vision should drive this train. Because if you're trying to create the kingdom of God and you're doing evangelism and discipleship, these things right here, that 30%, you ought to be meeting these needs right here.
And that's why it's so important in that training that you put about the admin work with the ministry. That's why it's so important to have that foundation.
And one or two things are going to tell me if you got over 20%, 30% here. It's either you got buildings that are so old that you're putting so much money into it, or you just focusing on property and you become so bureaucratic. That's what you become. You minister to the property and not to the people. And so you set that up. But that's just why it's easier for folk to go to a business meeting than come to Bible study. Because you ain't got to learn nothing. Somebody talk to me in here. And so then you got people running to the business because they ain't got to worry about being spiritual. They say, you know, because I pastor the country church, so they used to say when I first got there, it was like, Reverend, you got the spiritual stuff and we got the business. No, all of it's business. I got news flash for you. All of it's business. And pastor, by definition, means overseer. How many you going to oversee something that you ain't? All of it's business. It's the Lord's business. And sooner we remember that, because guess what? Stewards are not owners. You know, that's what they used to say. You're talking about, well, you can't say that's your church. That's the Lord's church. Well, yeah, it is my church. to paraphrase Al Patterson, he said a little understanding of semantics would help us. He said, my mama is my mama, but I don't own her. She's my mama through relationship. So now to understand it is my church, but I don't own it. But guess what? How many of us know that the owner can move the steward whenever he likes to? We don't own it, but it's ours by relationship and stewardship, but not by ownership. And with trustees, if we understand and have that mindset, and we understand vision, now we begin to see how the budget's shaping up. Because as trustees, if we see that we are low on this, we say, Reverend, Pastor, we looked at the budget in our budget committee, and we noticed that a lot of stuff is going more to facilities than it is to ministries. How can we begin to change that? Because remember, the vision is this is what we're supposed to be doing. And if we keep going in this direction, we ain't going to be heading in the way to do the vision. You ever heard a trustee talk about the pastor like that? You know, this mindset is totally different, because when we understand vision drives the train of the budget. And I'll be vision driven. And so we have our expenses and how we outline that. Any questions on that real quick before we move to chart of accounts? No question? Okay, I think why you still thinking. All right, chart of accounts. A chart of accounts is where everything is set up in the budget. Your chart of accounts is just that. It's the accounts are each of those line items. That's what you associate with a number. That's what we call chart of accounts. Each line number in accounting terms is an account. Each line item is an account. Each number that you have associated with that line item is an account. And so your chart of accounts is all the things that come under all of these. That's in your whole budget. Things that's under evangelism, mission, personnel, ministries, facilities. So that when you print out your sheet with your chart of accounts, it's easier. It's easier for the church if you get them used to moving them from looking at all of just those bunch of line items. You give them the overall, this is what we spend in ministries, this is what we spend in personnel, this is what we spend in facilities, this is what we spend in missions. So then if they ask questions, now you got the chart of account, the chart of accounts to say, okay, well, these specific line items here that go under here, blah, 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 phone number, you got the information here. But most of the time, most of us black folk, Negro Baptist churches, all we want to know, are we in the black or the red? Am I lying? That's mostly what most of us care about. But you got those little few that always want to nitpick everything. You're going to have to deal with that. That's part of the territory. But if you as trustees and you all do it, you all can, you don't have to dog them and sound like because you create a thing of distrust, but you explain to them, okay, well, here's, because this is what we did here, this is what and based on the vision, this is where we're heading, this is why we're moving this way. Now, if they get mad about that, that's on them. You let them deal with God on that. But y'all stand firm as this is where y'all moving toward the vision. And this is to please God, this is what we're doing. And this is why the chart of accounts becomes important. So when you talk about budgetary categorizations, we talked about that. Budget line item. Budgetary allocation versus budgetary spending. Now, and when you get ready to show each quarter reviewing your budget or each month reviewing your budget, is that you spent 100 or 1,000, let's say 1,000, I'll put 1K. You spent $1,000 so far that quarter. That's the first quarter. Quarter one. But for the year, you allocated 10,000. In the first quarter, you spent 1,000. So what you're going to show, what it's going to show is in that quarterly report, you spend $1,000 and you allocated 10, which means you still got $9,000 left for the year. Okay. Now, one of the other things that you ought to include in the budget, and this is very important, you ought to include what I talk about, a budgetary discretionary fund. A pastor should have a discretionary fund. It should be used for ministry purposes. Or like, for example, there are some things that happen, like say, for example, how many Cookman alumni we have in here? Okay. For example, you got Cookman that may ask for money, like they were having a crisis before, and we had to pull together and have some churches give them money. Well, versus when you got the budget solidified, and there was no money for Cookman when you created the budget, without a budgetary line item, you got to go to the trustees or the joint board or whatever you want to call it, and y'all have to sit down, and then you got to vote on whether you can get permission to allocate certain monies to go to Cookman and move it from whatever line item you're going to move it from to another line item. You may have to create one, because of the meeting, you have to vote to create one. The motion, second, questions, all in favor, aye, all opposed, ayes have it. And so then you got to create another line item versus having a budgetary discretionary fund, because there's always some things that come up that may be outside the area of the budget. And so if you had a pastoral discretionary budget line item, so when Cookman asks for some money, pastor ain't got to sit there and go on and vote in second. He just take it out of the discretionary line item. And I'm going to give you what I call a concept paper, so that when you plan stuff, mixing two things, but when you ready to plan, when ministries get ready to plan stuff, that they get these concept papers, there's a part of that concept paper that you can look. Every ministry creates their own budget based off those concept papers, so that then when it goes to the budgetary committee, that each person from each ministry be a part of that budgetary committee, so that then they take their stuff and they go, because one trustee is on that budgetary committee and the rest of the ministry heads are on that budgetary committee, so that now they create a budget together. So we do things together. So that now everything adds up. But like I said, there's a discretionary line item. So if Cookman asks for some money, pastor can just go, okay, write it up, send it to the trustee. It's on paper as to why he asking for it, because you put it up, you got a budgetary discretionary line item, you're going to give it to Cookman. So you got to put so much money in that discretionary line item for that. Or if pastors got a revivalist in, then there wasn't the money to take about the because y'all just happened to forget it. I mean, it was an honest mistake. So he can take that out of the budget instead of having to go second in motion and all this other kind of stuff. Take it out of pastor got discretionary fund. He can take the pastor out to eat. The revivalist out to eat. Or whatever. Anything that has to do with ministry, for whatever line item y'all didn't get to put it in, you got a discretionary line item because there's always something that's going to come up that's going to be outside of that budget that the pastor needs discretion to go on and just give it. They ain't got the second and voting to go through all that bureaucratic bull crap. But you check what you're spending toward the budget, maybe in quarter 2, you spent $8,000. And then you can go back and you look at it and say, well, wait a minute. Well, if we spend $8,000, is that normal for us or is it not normal? Then why are we spending so much here versus we didn't here and here and here so that we can be on track? And because next year you may have to make adjustments to the budget so that now you accommodate and if the reasons are valid and legitimate according to the vision of what you're supposed to be doing and the money's there to do it, then next time y'all make the budgetary line item for the next year, it gets adjusted. And then you could talk, and then when you show the budget for the next year, they come out, well, I noticed y'all had 10,000 and y'all bumped it up to 20,000. Why is that? Because you always got somebody wise that's going to ask that out in the pew. And now because y'all tracked it as the budgetary committee and the trustee that's over the budget committee, not over everything, but the budget committee, can now say this is the reason why we did this. Oh. See, inquiring minds want to know, huh? You know what I'm saying? But so that trustees over that position, you got trustees over other stuff. They ain't dealing with the budget, they dealing with other stuff. Everybody shouldn't be doing everything. That's why everybody go out. You got 20% of the people doing 80% of the work. And that's usually standard everywhere. And so are we understanding that? And like I said, that book, Crumroy book, talks about doing line items and other stuff. Now, here's some software that helps you. There's two kinds of, well, there's probably more, but these are the two I recommend. Particularly, I also recommend more specifically QuickBooks Premier for nonprofits. The hard part to any of those programs and Power Church Plus, that's more church friendly, but however, it's a closed system. Meaning that if you want to get, what do accountants do? CPAs come in and do to your accounting system. It's a, Audit, yes, audit. So that when you come in to do an audit on a closed system, they got to come into the system. Most CPAs who do audits use QuickBooks. They have the QuickBooks for accountants. But if you got the QuickBooks for Premier, all you do is put a USB in there, download the file, and then give them the USB, or you can download the file, and if it's small enough, you can email it to them. Or take the USB, give them the USB, and they'll pop it in, and they can look at everything from your system right there. And they can do an audit from your system right there on QuickBooks. But Power Church Plus or QuickBooks, the hardest thing to do to set up, the longest and most tedious thing to set up is, guess what? The chart of accounts. Because that's the basis upon which all of your budget and your income and expenses are based off of. It takes time to do and set up. I set up Nicely Gross chart of accounts for QuickBooks. I did it personally myself. I know how long it takes. I know how tedious it is. And the other thing is that you need, when you have QuickBooks and even when you have Power Church Plus, you need somebody who's going to input something that pays attention to detail. Because especially in QuickBooks, if you put something in wrong over here, it's going to jack up everything else over there. And then your reports are going to be jacked up. And that's why you need people to come back. That's why you need, initially when it's set up, you need people to come back and review and audit it to make sure your reports are keeping up with you, because QuickBooks, you can download the information from the bank. You can download the banking right online and download the information into your QuickBooks, and then do the reconciling the books. And you need to reconcile the books And that's another piece, because you need to have somebody that reconciles those books every month according to the bank statement. So that when you look at the bank statement, you look at the books, your printouts, they ought to match. And the bank statements don't need to go to nobody's house. It needs to go to the church and be put in the safe. Why y'all think I say that? Because I know it's happened all the time. Because if that person dies, you SOL. And see, it should be coming to the church. It should not leave the church. It should stay in the church files locked up, fireproof safe or whatever. So, so you at least have some, you can pull it from the bank again if you need to, but you need to have something in a fireproof file cabinet, fireproof safe or whatever. So you have your financial records intact. And then and the other thing about QuickBooks is you need to continuously every time you make transactions every week, you need to back it up and put it on a separate file, because computers do break down. They should be it's better if you get a cloud file. You put it on the cloud somewhere, and then if something happens, guess what? You can pull it right back off the cloud. But you need to back it up frequently, bi-weekly. Every month, something you need to back it up frequently. See, it's a lot of work and care that's involved in making sure your records are accurate and they're safe. But you got to get certain people. You got to pay attention to detail. So especially when you're inputting stuff in QuickBooks, you got to pay attention to detail, because one thing could jack up a whole lot of other stuff. So. Yeah, QuickBooks and Power Church Plus, but like I said, Power Church Plus is a closed system, but it is more church friendly. Now, QuickBooks for Premier, you got to begin to change. You got to change some of the preset terminology they have in there, and you can change them to make them church friendly. But that's extra work too. You got to go in there, just like the chart of accounts. You got to go in, and you can go in and change some other terms that they have in there and change them that are church friendly, so that when they get the report. And then, of course, it'll give you a printout of tithes, because it also does the input offerings when you do those for each individual. Because what QuickBooks calls them is customers. They're customers. And so when you do the tithes and offering statements, it'll come up, you pull it up as customers, and you pull it out, and it shows what they've been given. And you get the statement and give them the statement at the end of the year. And QuickBooks will give you a whole, if you've been inputting it in right. And then when you got those envelopes and all that, once you input it in right and you tax it against your envelopes, but you also got to remember, you need to make sure that when you see those envelopes and y'all taking into account, if there ain't nothing in the envelope, but they say it's $100 and ain't nothing in there, because people do that. You know that, right? So what you have to do is now what you have to do, even though you may know somebody that's a liar and a scoundrel, y'all supposed to laugh at my joke now. Bro, we had your envelope and you said it had a certain amount of money in it, but you didn't put any money in there. Is it, did you forget? No, I didn't forget. Okay. All right. Well, bless the Lord. So then we go back. And we notate on there 0 and then leave it at that. And make sure you notate and initial it, so that you made the adjustment. So then you follow the envelope. But after that, once you print and then you print out the statement that week of everybody who gave what, really that's what they used to do the envelopes, and some churches still hold an envelope. But technically, IRS to deal with envelopes. But if you have the statement already, they deal with that too. That's just as good. So then you can chunk the envelopes. And you have those, and you keep them up to 7 years. And so, you have that. One of the things I want to say about income, when we talk about expenses and how we get income, tithes and offerings one way. If the church owns a McDonald's, and a certain portion of the business donates back into the ministry. Now, it is not taxable if you use it for ministry. that you get, the income you receive from rent. If you got a house and you rent the house out, and that money goes back to the church, if it's used for ministry, it's not taxable. But if it's not used for ministry, then it's taxable, and you have to. There's a certain return you have to do on it. But that's all why when we talk about, and a couple things I want to say. This one, this is why it's important for the church to incorporate as a nonprofit by the state, at least. Now, I'm not saying 501c3, but at least incorporate by the state, because you need to be incorporated by the state before you can do a 501c3. But this is why they need to be incorporated, because, and of course, it addressed that in the book. And the reason why is because if somebody falls on your church and sues your church with you being an unincorporated entity, you know what happens? There's a term called deep pockets. And then, which means that if they sue the church and they find out you're an unincorporated entity, they can sue every individual member of their church. It means your house, your car, your bank account individually is up for grabs. And see, that's why when people start, they were talking about that stuff that night ago, talking about, are you just trying to make the church because it was an unincorporated entity? You just trying to make the church like a business and all that. I said, let me tell you something. Have you ever heard of the term called deep pockets? It means if we get sued, each and every person who's a member of this church, their house can be up for grabs. You know what they quickly did then, right? Well, we need to incorporate. Because incorporation law says that if the corporation gets sued and it's a corporate entity, only the property of the entity can be taken. The assets or whatever can be up for grabs, but not the individual constituents of that corporation. So you protect yourself. That's why you incorporate. So if y'all not incorporated by the state, you need to. Yeah. So now y'all trustees of Mount Zion know why, right? You see, and then you begin to explain it to everybody else who's talking about, y'all making the church like a business, like the world coming into the church. Well, you explain that to them. Why? There's a reason why. Jesus says, be wise as serpents and harmless as a dove. Okay, so now, and this other thing about income I want to say. Earlier I addressed the issue when Jesus said, and talking about in one of the gospels said, you've made my father's house should be a house of worship, and in another gospel it says, you've made my father's house a den of thieves. And what we've used a lot of times is to say that you don't need to be selling nothing into the church. You don't need to be selling nothing in the church. No, you can't sell nothing in the church. And I'm sure some of y'all have heard that, right? Because they use that text where Jesus turned over the tables and the money changers. And then in one of the Gospels, he says, you made my father's house a den of thieves. That key word, thieves, tells you what's going on. Because what was happening was when they would make a pilgrimage to Jerusalem, there were 3 major festivals in Jerusalem that those who were out of state and out of town would be encouraged to come. One of them was the major festival. That major festival was the time when they had the day of Pentecost. Was going on because everybody was around there. So when they get old enough, they would to make a pilgrimage back to Jerusalem. And so what would happen is that because they lived in another country, they had the money of that country. And the temple, even though it was in Jerusalem, had its own money outside of the money of Palestine. Okay? So whenever you go to another country, and I lived in Germany before, so whenever you go to another country, you go to the exchange booth to take your American dollars and get German marks. And whatever the exchange rate is, the marks per dollar that you would get, whether it's 2.5, 1.5, 1.75. Same thing was in the Bible days when they would come, because what they would have to do is, number one, to go to worship. And I want you to hear this. To go to worship, they would have to purchase a sacrifice, because to carry a sacrifice on 2 weeks journey is unrealistic. You bring chickens, cows, or whatever you're going to sacrifice, and carrying that thing on a 2-day journey, it won't be a sacrifice no more, because God wants the best, because you didn't wear that thing out. You know what I'm saying? And so there was people who had businesses on the temple, outside temple courts. They would have what they call the convention. They call it the exchange. Well, not the concession booths or whatever. But anyway, there would be somebody whose business it was to exchange money. They made money off of exchanging money. It was nothing wrong with making money because that's what they did. They had business owners back then because they exchanged and bartered and exchanged livestock and all that stuff. But then back then they started having coinage. So you needed, first of all, to exchange your money for temple coinage. And they had to make money because they had to make a living. So they made money off of exchanging money. So there was a certain percentage or cut that they got. Okay? But what was going on that front is they was charging almost what did you call an exuberant amount of cut. You may charge 10% on your exchange rate. They were charging 70. Okay, now that's the tip of the iceberg. So they were getting got on the exchange. Now they had to purchase a sacrifice because ain't no worship going on. See, this is another key we got to understand. Ain't no worship. That's why when we talk about, we don't understand the significance. When we talk about altar call, anything that came to the altar got sacrificed. Hello, somebody. And so God honors sacrifices. The sacrifices acceptable to the Lord are a wounded and contrite heart. Oh God, thou will not despise. That's Bible, ain't it? Psalm 50, 51, is it Psalm 51? Maybe not. It's one of the songs, but I know it because I preached on it before. But sacrifices got to take place. So now, since they got exchange rate, they got on that. Now they got to buy a sacrifice. There was somebody who had business in selling doves and selling, goods so that they can sacrifice for worship. Well, guess what they did? Instead of a dove costing $5, they charged $25 and $50. So they got in the money exchange and they got in by purchasing the sacrifice. And God ain't about you getting ripped off. He don't mind you making money because you got to make a living. But God is against ripping folk off. Taking advantage of the situation. It's called taking advantage of the situation. And that's why Jesus turned the tables over. That's why he got upset, because God is not about ripping folk off. God is about order and structure and decency and respect. And so Jesus tore up the tables. He didn't mind anything selling. That's why he said it's a den of thieves. And the focus began to be about making all this money rather than worship. So ain't nothing wrong with selling stuff in the church, just as long as you don't rip nobody off. So your income, however you get your income, whether it's selling chicken dinners, because a lot of times if we think about it right, because there's some sisters that can cook in there, we ought to begin to get them a license and get them to where they can, and then teach them the proper ways to handle food according to health board of inspection and get inspected so they can do such, so that then they can have their own catering business, and then they can begin to the church can have maybe a catering business, and then or either have a professional kitchen and rent out the space so that the catering people can do their bids and rent the space for doing catering. Or the church have a catering company, and the sisters don't want to have their business because they don't want the headaches. The church has a catering company, and the sisters work for the catering company of the church, which is a separate entity now. It's a separate, not under the church. It's a separate entity that's connected to the church, and a lawyer who writes up those things can know how to write it up and set it up for you, so that now you got other income. So a portion of that certain percentage of that income goes right back to the church. And then you start setting up things where you don't just spend everything you get. But then you take some of that money and put it away. And so, like I was talking about before, building an annuity so that then you can endow the pastor's chair and the pastor's chair be paid for eventually over time. So you ain't got to worry about the tithes and offering. Hallelujah. Then you may save that money so you can now purchase a business or a McDonald's or Burger King or whatever, so that now the church can have some money. This is why some of these white churches ain't got nothing but 6 people in them. Can still exist because they got plenty of money in endowments and other places that some of the foreparents had put in place, that the church, that's why they can keep paying the pastor's salary, because it's been endowed now and they only got 6 people in the church. But the church is still surviving because they got an endowment out of this world. Because they had a few millionaires on the church that had the Lord in their heart that knew how to set some money away for the church. Or when they died, here you go, when they died, they had a certain portion of their life insurance or their estate to donate it to the church. 10% of their life insurance went to the church. Because I changed my policies now, I'm going through different relationship stuff, but I changed my policies. My old policy had, because I don't need as much anymore, but my old policy, it was close to $1 million, and 10% of that $1 million was going to the church if I died. So you give in life and in death, and then so that the church can have some, because we don't do that. That's why we begging from hand to foot now, because we don't learn how to give back even in death. And so our income can come from many sources, and we learn how to do that. And of course, there's a chart of accounts for the income too that comes in, and you go from rental properties or whatever, however you do that. But make sure you set up your liabilities and your structures in place to protect yourself. But also now that you set up your chart of accounts and you set them up on those venues. So I think we're getting down to the end. One of the things I want to talk about real quick. What time is it, by the way? I know I'm over time. 2:30. Okay. I was almost on track. But anyway, there's something called what I call a concept paper. And this can help. This is for any ministry. And I'll try to pull up one of those on Microsoft Word so you can see the outline of it. Who is the target audience? What is the purpose of the event? When is it being held? Where is it being held? How much does it cost? How does it support church vision? Okay? And and that's the last thing. I'm gonna pull it up so you can see it. I'll pull up a concept paper and put it on Microsoft Word. Because I like I said, I can give you a soft copy. Let me just give you a sample when it's already filled. Let me see if it's got an itemization on it, because that's what I want to see for trustees. Because I actually left it at home, but I had a copy I was going to let you see a copy of one, so that let me see. Let's do past his anniversary. Okay, here you go. Here's one. Can y'all see that? Uh-oh. Oh, that's because okay. Lord, let me get out. Let me do this. Let me set up settings real quick. Display. All right, multiple displays. Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Can y'all see that now? Let me blow it up a little bit. Okay. Now y'all see. First of all, you see that I have vision up. That's the first thing. Y'all see that vision? Because that's to remind everybody what the vision is when you get ready to do it, so you can see what the vision is. So when we do, and I do priority 1, 2, and 3. Priority, what I've designated priority 1 was training. Priority 2 is your programs, like 100 men in black suit, 100 women in white hats program. And then number 3 is anything you have left over to do, because if you don't have enough money, there may be another ministry that can help you out of their budget to do what you need to be done. And if you sit around a round table, metaphorically speaking, everybody can help each other when they begin to produce their what they want to do for the ministries. And of course, let's see, when is it? Proposed date, described event, and then the lineup follow suggested cost of the event. Here's what's germane to trustees I want to talk about. When we talk about how much does it cost, so now you're itemizing it. Honorary $400 a day for 4 days. That's pastors, was that revival? think it's revival. And then plane flight average, or travel is 0.375 cents a mile for the travel. Per diem is $45 a day for 3 days, and that would be like $135 or whatever. And then total food costs for the whole event for feed everybody is $850. So now you're dealing with all the costs of what you're getting ready to plan for each event, for whatever ministry it is. So that each ministry does that. Now when each one ministry is tasked to be the budget committee, because you got to just have a secretary on every ministry, should have a budget person on every ministry, you should have a training person on every ministry. In each of those prospective positions, they pull together for the training. For the training ones for the budget, pull together for the budget when they deal with the trustee that's over the budget committees. So now, y'all, this is what you wind up, because now you do all you're going to do is has a cost to it. Some things don't, but the ones that do, you pull up. These are the ones you have a cost to it. So this helps to establish your budget overall. Once all the ministries come together and establish their costs for whatever line items they have, and then y'all know what line items to put them in because you didn't start it right here. You know, so whatever line items, you'll see what they categorize. You could categorize the line items, and then you can go on from there. So it makes it a lot easier now when you get ready to do your budget. Y'all know what y'all supposed to be doing based on that budget. And every year for what I have, usually I was trying to get Tom McKean to do that. I think it's a little too fast, too soon. But I would submit, when it comes to the budget, I do submit one concept paper just like this to the budget person to develop the budget. I did it last year. For whether I say they can get it done or not, but I submit what I want. Don't mean I'm going to get what I want, but I submit what I want. So, and I use the concept papers to do that, around stuff that's germane for pastoral stuff. But yeah, so you have the cost of the budget, and then of course you see at the bottom other preliminary steps to achieve the goal. And so you outline those in the concept paper too. And that kind of helps you be more organized. So each ministry has that, and you can get your budget persons, you contact budget persons together so to do with the budget committee so y'all can help organize. Doesn't that make it seem like it's going to be a lot easier to get a budget together? Because when all the ministries input into it, they got ownership. When they have ownership, they're going to be more concerned about what's going on with the budget. Because they're all invested in it, ideally. And for some of us, for some churches are different than others, but ideally, if we're all invested in participating to get that budget done, then we're all going to be more ready to be more helpful of each other and be more respectful when the budget has come forth, because our ministries have had a hand in it. So, with all that said, any questions?
Each ministry should have
Training person, a secretary, a budget person, and a program person. That's 4. You got a secretary, training, budget, program, along with the head of every ministry. That's 5. Because then it makes it a lot easier, because everybody ain't doing everything, and you're more structured at what you're doing. And then this person is going to be with the budget committee, because when Christian education comes, the training person for each ministry is going to be part of the director, the head, or if they're actually hired, you hire a pastor who specializes in Christian education, that you hiring this minister of Christian education, and they get all the training people together, and they begin to construct the training calendar. Because ideally, you should have a 5-year training calendar. But you work 2 years out, you solidify the first year, work 2 years out, and you're always working toward to get to a 5-year training calendar. And then you can make adjustments you can make adjustments on year 2, but based on what you're doing on year 1. But you got the plan in place. The plan, just because the plan's in place, don't mean it's set in stone. It just means that you have an idea where you're going. And as you deal with stuff, you make adjustments. And you can make adjustments a year out, and it's easy to do that. Because technically, we really do that, but we don't realize we do it, but because we don't maintenance it. And every year we do what? Church anniversary, pastor's anniversary, ushers program, every year. We already got an unlimited calendar, but it ain't a training calendar. Because we do the same thing year after year, year after year, and ain't nobody coming to them white women in hats program and them black men in suits program no more, because it's useless. All we doing is trying to raise money instead of just asking for money. We'll get up here, jump, have all this service, and pay the preacher $500 to raise 10. When all I did was trying to raise money. Let's be real about it. You know, my thing in the church is just be real. If we're going to raise money, just ask. It's okay, we're going to have a program, but don't be hiding, disguising the issue so you can raise some money. It's good to fellowship and have church. I love having church, but if we need money, let's raise some money. Let's ask people for money. They're going to cry regardless. There's going to be something going to cry regardless. You got to ask, because you may need it. You may be trying to raise money for the capital campaign of 20% that you need to raise in missions. Tell them what you're doing. Be up front. Amen. Any other questions?